Hey, B.
What's up?
Tall, dark, and handsome. Everything I'm not.
Talking about producer Steve?
No.
Oh, sorry. Must be Dr. Wolfe time.
Dr. Wolfe time.
Dr. Wolfe time. We love Dr. Wolfe. Ladies love Dr. Wolfe.
So anyway, he is the reconstruction expert that Action Jackson brought in
Nice.
to stomp. What's his name?
Trooper Paul?
Trooper Paul into oblivion.
The amazing Trooper Paul.
Yeah.
Genius.
So we're going to listen to his
Genius.
explanation of the reconstruction of the accident.
All right. Let's hit it.
Is ARCCA known both nationally and internationally? Is it recognized as a leader in accident reconstruction issues?
Yes.
As the director of accident reconstruction at ARCCA, do you specialize in both accident reconstruction and the human factors that are associated with such reconstruction where necessary?
Yes.
Can you give me a synopsis of the professional discipline of what is accident reconstruction?
I think a simple definition in my mind would be the application of physics, engineering science, and mathematics to collision events. I always like to think of it as if you open up a puzzle box and you dump the pieces out and you've got a bunch of pieces and you're trying to piece together the evidence to see how everything fits to get a clear picture.
And what is the application of human factors to that process?
So to give you an example of human factors in the field of accident reconstruction, so I do a lot of nighttime visibility and conspicuity work. So to give you an example of that, let's say a driver's driving down the road at night, there's a pedestrian that's crossing the road. So we want to have an understanding based upon that pedestrian's clothing, the headlights of the vehicle, any potential artificial lighting in the area. When does a driver recognize that individual on the roadway? And then we can also look at literature to have an understanding of how do drivers respond based upon the hazard they're presented with. So there's different response times depending on the hazard. So it's going to be different for a pedestrian crossing the roadway or a driver responding to a vehicle suddenly stopping in front of them.
Pause that for a second.
Accident reconstruction.
Sounds good.
Holy smokes, dude.
He sounds like a very intelligent man.
Dude,
He sounds like he's very, very smart and very educated.
even
He
though
knows what he's talking about.
it was a simple explanation, it confused me. I'm not going to lie. Let's roll.
Do you investigate and reconstruct both passenger vehicle issues, commercial vehicle issues, motor vehicle, pedestrian issues, all of the above?
Yes, I see all types of accidents.
And how long have you been doing this work with ARCCA?
A little over 7 years now.
What education, training, and background qualifies you to perform the duties that you've just described for the jury?
Back in 2012, I received a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from James Madison University, along with a minor in mathematics. Some of my courses while at JMU included courses in physics, statics, dynamics, kinematics, material science, along with your other engineering sciences. Subsequent to my undergraduate degree, I then went on to the University of Delaware to pursue my PhD in electrical and computer engineering with a concentration in electromagnetics and photonics.
The highest degree that you do hold, sir.
I have an associate's degree.
In what?
Administration of Justice.
Trumped. He just got trumped. Bro, my IQ just went up 100 points. I swear to God.
Do you have as it relates to accident reconstruction in
Wow.
addition to the formal education
Wow.
and the PhD?
Certainly. So in addition to my undergraduate degree and my PhD, I've continued to take courses through Northwestern University in crash reconstruction. Some of those courses have included human factors, lighting. I've taken courses on electronic vehicle data, photogrammetry, three-dimensional laser scanning. So I've continued to take courses subsequent to graduating.
How many cases would you say in your experience in your career have you reconstructed or attempted to reconstruct, either you or your team members?
I don't actively track that. If I had to estimate at this point in my career, it would probably be well over 1,000.
And how many of those 1,000, I know you'd have a number specific, but how many of those 1,000 would you say involved pedestrians as well?
Several hundred. As I mentioned earlier,
Probably 30%.
excuse me, a great deal of my work is in the field of lighting and visibility. So there's a direct correlation between time of day and pedestrian incidents. We see a rise in the evening and night hours just due to drivers having difficult ability
Sun
to
in
try
your
to
eyes
perceive
and
and recognize individuals. So I
eyes.
see a lot of pedestrian collisions in my casework.
Done testing or research as it relates to the kinematics and the interaction between pedestrians and vehicles?
Kinematics.
Absolutely. So we do a number of tests at ARCCA to look at the interaction between pedestrians and vehicles. One of the ones I know I did most recently where we were evaluating a vehicle essentially rolling over a pedestrian. So we wanted to understand the vehicle dynamics as well as the interaction between the pedestrian and the road surface. So we conducted testing at ARCCA to evaluate that.
As an accident reconstructionist, doctor, do you or have you studied or tested the forces that are at play between objects interacting, a human being interacting with a vehicle, for instance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of what you do.
Yes, sir.
Describe that.
So we use hybrid instrumented dummies at ARCCA for our testing. So if we want to have an understanding that an occupant in a vehicle, the forces that they might experience, or for any matter, again, if it's an instance where you have something that ends up falling on someone's head and you want to have an understanding of the forces involved in that, we perform testing with hybrid dummies.
Yep, as you should.
Now you're.
Yes, you
Thank
can
you.
move on.
You've been qualified in other courts to testify as an expert in the area of accident reconstruction. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You were not hired by the defense in this case, correct?
That is correct.
At the time you did your expert review, Dr. Wolfe, and your consultation, you and I had never met.
That's correct.
You did not know who I was.
I did not.
You'd never met Ms. Little,
No.
Mr. Unetti.
No.
Matter of fact, you'd never heard of this case.
That's correct.
You were hired.
Wow, he's coming in blind,
not
dude.
connected in any way to the defense. Is that right?
Correct.
And not connected in any way to the Commonwealth. Is that right?
Correct.
So your analysis and your conclusions and your opinions are completely independent of the defense and the Commonwealth in this case. Is that right?
Objection.
I object, Your Honor!
Sustained, Mr. Jackson. You can ask it differently.
Ask it differently.
Were you and your team asked to undertake a review for purposes of accident reconstruction of the case that's now pending before the court?
Yes, sir.
Was your team asked to do this by the agency that ultimately retained you, not us?
That's correct.
Who at ARCCA was assigned to the team who would ultimately undertake this job of accident reconstruction?
It was myself, Dr. Andrew Rentschler, and Scott Klein.
What was Dr. Rentschler's role in this case as it's distinguished from your role in the case?
Certainly. So Dr. Rentschler is a biomechanical
I like this guy.
engineer, and ultimately
He's
he
awesome.
assessed whether or not there was a mechanism for the injuries of Mr. John O'Keefe.
And what was your focus? If he's talking about the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe, what was your focus in your reconstruction and your analysis?
I would simply say it was looking more at the damage to the vehicle.
Okay, so in terms of your team and the responsibilities of each of the team members, you were more focused on the damage to the SUV. Dr. Rentschler was more focused on the injuries suffered by Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
I think that's a fair characterization, although with the caveat that we worked together as a team. So we weren't isolated kind of in those areas,
Right.
not speaking to each other. We certainly worked
One
together.
took the car, one took the body.
Understood.
Yeah.
Were you provided or did you review certain materials in furtherance of your consultation in this matter?
Yes.
What were you provided?
We were provided photographs of the incident location. We were provided photographs of the Lexus. There were a couple of incident reports that we received. I could look at my report for the full list, but those are the ones.
You can go ahead and do that, Doctor.
Do you have the report with you?
Yes, sir.
I have a copy of it. Is this faster?
Sure. If you.
May I?
Sure.
See how easy court is when you don't have to lie?
It just flows.
You just spit it out.
It just flows.
Yeah, it's very easy because you're just telling the story. This is awesome. He's an SME, subject matter expert, right? We call SME. Well, most people call SME.
How many categories of materials were you provided?
Provided, it would be approximately 10.
Could you list those off for the jurors, please?
It would be the Norfolk SPDU homicide death report, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of State Police crime scene report, OCME dispatch removal report, photographs of the incident location, videos of the incident location, photographs of the 2021 Lexus LX570.
What you don't see on the video is where he
photographs
says
of
these were all
recovered evidence,
written in crayon.
Crash data retrieval report from the 2021 Lexus 570, report of autopsy and autopsy photographs.
Got something against crayons?
No.
Based on these data that you were provided, were you able to satisfactorily, to your mind, satisfactorily engage in the consultation that you were hired to do
Yes.
and come up with some opinions and conclusions based on scientific certainty?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you review scene photographs of the alleged incident?
Yes, sir.
What information were you able to glean or gather from your review of the photographs, from the scene specifically?
So from those photographs, I was able to identify there was fragments of transparent red, clear plastic. There also appeared to be pieces of chrome and black plastic. I also observed what appeared to be glass fragments along with a black drinking straw.
Did you also review some videos?
Yes.
That was out at the scene, maybe a leaf blower?
Correct. It appeared to be daytime, yes.
Okay. What did you note about the photography at the scene of the items that were being photographed?
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind is it was a little bit difficult to follow the evidence, so to speak. So typically, when I go out and do an inspection, especially of a fresh incident, let's say I've got a debris field or I've got tire marks, what I like to do is kind of step into the scene, if you will, where you take global perspective shots and then you step into a specific piece of evidence so that you can, at a later point in time, identify where that evidence is. I noted that in a lot of these photographs, I didn't see a whole lot of that stepping in. It was essentially just zoomed right into where that evidence is, but not really having a great understanding of where was it relative to all the other
Spatially, right? Spatially.
Correct.
That's why your crime scene is big. You make it big.
Yeah.
Lots of photos, thousands of photos.
Materials that you described for the court, did you get an understanding of what the Commonwealth's theory of the case is, specifically that Mr. O'Keefe was struck by the Lexus SUV?
Objection.
Sustained.
I object, Your Honor!
Did you come to understand that the allegations before the court were that Mr. O'Keefe was struck by the vehicle?
Objection.
I object, Your Honor!
Sustained. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Jim Carrey, you got to ask it differently.
Did you perform an accident reconstruction specifically focused on determining whether or not damage to the Lexus was consistent with hitting Mr. O'Keefe? Also focused on whether or not the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe were the result of being hit by a vehicle?
Yes.
Okay.
He even drinks water normally.
During your analysis, did you note the damage to the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Describe that, please.
So the primary damage was to the right taillight. It appeared to be fractured with the majority of the lens cover, so that clear and red plastic covering missing from it. In addition to that, if you're looking at the back of the vehicle, to the left of that, in the area above there's also another tail lamp assembly on the lift gate. So above that assembly, there was a small dent along with some paint chips on the bumper,
The glass.
more so in the wraparound section as it kind of curves around to the right side of the vehicle. There appeared to be some superficial scratches as well in that area.
Was there any other damage or deformation that you were able to glean from your review, the photogrammetry, damage to the Lexus, the bumpers, the panels, the quarter panel, the sheet metal, anything like that?
No, the rest was remarkably intact.
Is it common in vehicle pedestrian collisions that there is some sort of bumper displacement and or sheet
Deformation,
metal
I think.
deformation that's concomitant to that?
Absolutely. Assuming a pedestrian is positioned in a normal upright position, you certainly would expect to see damage to the bumper. In a lot of cases, what happens is, the bumper is just clipped on. So again, the force of that impact will oftentimes cause the bumper to kind of become unmounted or unclipped. You certainly could see deformation to body paneling, such as the lift gate or the quarter panel as well.
Is that especially true at higher speeds, meaning above 15 miles per hour or so?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Was there any apparent
Steve, you want to pause for a sec, Steve?
that appeared consistent?
So in the 70s, right, cars were made out of steel,
Oh, yeah.
right? You hit somebody, there's not going to be no damage
Oh,
to
man,
the
they
car.
just hose the blood off the car and resell it.
Right. But these newer cars are designed to
Break
absorb
apart.
the impact.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And what they do is the bumpers pop off because those clips are designed to break
Right.
instead of causing more damage to the vehicle.
Yep.
Right. Now, if it's too big of an impact, that shock wave is going to go through the rear quarter panel and buckle. Those are designed to absorb the impact as well.
Correct.
Right. So what he's explaining is that there should be more than what there was.
Correct.
Right. And it's not happening.
And we all know that.
Right. So
We all know that.
these cars are designed to absorb impacts.
Yep.
So it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to
Right.
get fixed.
And to me, he's describing what it sounds like. If she hit him, the hand is up high with the glass, which explains why it's in the center.
Yep. A little deformation there.
The bumper hitting his leg.
Yep.
Okay. But a leg in pants, even just a leg in shorts, it's not going to leave scratches.
Yeah.
It's not going to scratch the paint on a car.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
With any kind of pedestrian interaction that you saw?
No, it was really confined to just the taillight, a very isolated portion of the vehicle.
like somebody went,
Yeah.
During your,
Yeah.
your review and your investigation, did you note information concerning items that were supposedly found on the bumper?
Yes.
What was that?
the glass.
I believe it was noted there was 2 apparent glass fragments located on the top bumper cover.
What's the significance of the presence of those items or the lack of materiality of those items in your view?
Well, again, I think this, going back to the scene evidence, again, we knew that there was glass fragments, what appeared to be from a drinking glass, at the scene of the alleged incident.
Is there any glass consistent with the glass that was supposedly found on the bumper, in the taillight housing, the taillight mechanism, anything from the car, from the Lexus, that would account for that glass?
Okay, I think I understand. So the taillight itself is not comprised of any glass. It is all plastic. So that damage, or I should say that glass on the top bumper cover could not have come from the right taillight.
Now, based on your review of the information that was provided to you, did you undertake any testing of that vehicle? I'm sorry, any testing concerning the damage to the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
All right, can you describe what that testing was?
So we performed, again, this is with Dr. Rentschler and I working together on this again. We performed projectile testing to the tail lamp with a drinking glass as well as a hybrid head form.
Test it.
Let's take those one at a time.
That's like 101, man.
How would you describe the drinking glass?
You're right. Basic.
Certainly. So again, from our review of the evidence, we knew that we had an isolated portion of damage to Lexus confined to the taillight. So we know that we're dealing with potentially a small object that could have created that. Looking at, again, the evidence in terms of the scene photographs, we know that we have a damaged drinking glass at the scene in the vicinity of the fragments of the taillight. So the theory that Dr. Rentschler and I put forward is potentially an individual threw this drinking glass at the back of the Lexus,
Okay.
causing the taillight to
Okay.
fracture.
That makes sense.
Does make sense.
Getting back to that testing, and I interrupted your flow, you were looking at whether or not the glass could have produced the damage to the rear taillight that you saw, correct?
Correct.
And what did you do in furtherance of making a determination about whether or not that was possible?
Certainly. So myself and one of our lab technicians at ARCCA, we designed and developed a pressurized air cannon. So it was capable of firing a projectile such as a drinking glass at the taillight. So
It's like Mythbusters. Building shit back there.
cannon, but it had a barrel, and then there was a valve that would open rapidly, and directly behind that was a pressurized vessel. And depending on the pressure, the PSI of that vessel,
Kind of like a potato
would
cannon.
determine essentially the speed at which that glass would be projected into the taillight.
So you literally built a cannon.
Pretty cool test. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
He learned that in math class.
Yeah.
Pretty cool job. Tell me what the
Can you tell
result
Trooper Paul that,
was
please?
with this pneumatic cannon that would fire the drinking glass.
Certainly. So we performed 2 different tests in terms of speeds. The target speeds were 30 and 40 miles per hour.
Why was that?
Well, so with consultation with Dr. Rentschler, he indicated that that is a reasonable speed at which an adult male or an individual, for that matter, could throw a drinking glass at the taillight. Well, I think we wanted to have an understanding is when a projectile such as a drinking glass interacted with the taillight, would we get damage on the test taillight that was
Consistent with that,
consistent
yeah.
with that of the subject taillight?
Understood. So based on your theory, were you able to approximate the damage on the taillight?
Yes.
Describe that for us.
So as I mentioned, we ran 2 tests. The target speeds were at 30 and 40 miles per hour. And there was a little bit of variability in terms of what our target was and what we actually achieved. So the achieved speeds were at 31 miles per hour, and 37 miles per hour. So there's just depending on how the glass leaves the barrel and some of the rotation can affect some of the speed or ultimately the end result speed to that. So what I will say, though, is that with the 37 mile per hour projectile into the taillight, we noted and observed that there was damage that was consistent with that of the subject tail lamp, and that the test tail lamp had the majority of the outer lens fractured and missing, broken into pieces, as well as some underlying damage to some of the internal components as well.
Okay. Pause it for a sec, Steve. So do you think, let's say they got in a little domestic argument, okay?
Probably could have. Yeah.
Right? Or not even that, let's say not even that, okay? She's, well, I'm not going in. You go have fun.
Yep.
She backs up, hits him, right? She goes, dag nabbit, right? Like this, hits him. That's that cause of death. Dag nabbit. She takes off. He tosses it.
Yeah.
Right?
Or could be. Could be. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm throwing a glass 40 miles an hour.
No, you can.
Can you?
You can.
A glass?
Yeah. Yeah.
40? It
Absolutely.
seems fast. Doesn't it seem fast?
No.
It seems fast.
No. Well, you can go from 30 to 47, right? You could throw it pretty easily.
Yeah,
you could throw it.
I mean,
40 miles an hour.
I was a pitcher in high school. I think my fastest was about 88, 89.
All right, so there you go.
But I was like 15, 16.
Flexible then.
You're saying, well,
Now it would be like 20. I can't even throw anymore.
And pick up your arm after.
I know.
the damage to the taillight using a pneumatic cannon firing a glass at 37 miles an hour directly at the taillight, correct?
Correct.
All right. And that would also shatter the glass too, correct?
Correct.
Did you do any testing about whether or not that damage to the taillight could be produced by a person simply holding a glass and being hit by the car driving in reverse?
That's a great question.
We didn't do any testing of that, and primarily because, again, if we're looking at the arm and its total length, right? We only have a narrow damage pattern, which on the taillight, if you think about where where it meets the lift gate into where it starts to wrap around to the side of the vehicle, that's only about 6.5 inches in width.
All right.
Yeah.
When you
Very
fired
compact,
that
right?
glass into the taillight was static. In other words, it was not going to move. It was immovable at that point, correct?
Correct.
So the glass is hurling through the air at 37 miles an hour and hits a static object that's resisting, and that smash is what produced ultimately the taillight damage that you were able to replicate. Is that right?
Yes.
If a person were holding in his hand the glass, and the taillight were to hit that hand, the hand would not remain static, correct?
Objection.
I object, Your Honor!
Well, the car was, she said they're 24 miles an hour, right?
If the taillight were the taillight were to make contact with a person holding a glass, would that replicate what you did in terms of you're firing a glass into the taillight? In other words, are they apples and apples?
No, I don't think it would be the same.
Okay. Why is
Not at
that?
all.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, again, the damage to the back of the Lexus, again, is confined to just that roughly, again, when we're talking about the taillight itself, that 6.5-inch section in width.
Right.
So it's inconsistent with the total length of the arm, and certainly from discussion with Dr. Rentschler, inconsistent with the injuries to the arm.
There you go.
Given everything in your investigation was revealed concerning this testing, are you saying that the taillight was damaged by John O'Keefe holding a drinking glass that was hit by an SUV?
Objection.
I object, Your Honor!
Sustained.
In all the information that you were provided, you were not provided anything that suggested that John O'Keefe threw a glass at the taillight. Right?
Objection.
I object, Your Honor!
I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of him.
May I? Yes. Thank you. What information, if any, were you provided that suggested that John O'Keefe threw a glass at the taillight?
No information.
What information, if any, were you provided that suggested that John O'Keefe may have had a pneumatic cannon with him that night?
I'm not aware of any information regarding that.
We're gonna go with he definitely didn't have one of those.
Jackson's pissed.
Well, he's doing great. This guy is
Also did
awesome.
some Testing concerning a drop test. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Tell us about that drop test testing.
Certainly. So, again, through discussion with Dr. Rentschler, it was my understanding that Mr. O'Keefe had a skull fracture on the back of his head. So we wanted to do an evaluation of the interaction between the back of a head. In this case, we used again, talking about that instrumented dummy again, we used the instrumented hybrid head form to perform a drop test to evaluate the forces of an interaction between a taillight from the Lexus and the human head.
Say what?
What height did you choose to perform this drop test?
7.5 feet.
Why did you choose that height?
Well, if you calculate it through physics and the acceleration due to gravity, that would equate to an impact speed of 15 miles per hour at that height.
And what was the significance of 15 miles per hour?
Well, that was essentially kind of a starting point for us, if you will. So I will tell you that in reverse, 15 miles an hour is fast. I don't know. if
very
it's your
fast.
Speedometer,
Very
pulling
fast.
into your driveway, reversing into a parking stall. Most people probably don't go more than 5 miles an hour or so. So 15 miles an hour in
to five.
reverse is fast, especially when we're talking about, it's my understanding it was nighttime. There was winter conditions, potentially wet or icy roads. So again, that speed is going to be what I would say on the high end for going in reverse.
24 miles an hour.
Also, in addition with respect to kind of just the nature of that speed, it's my understanding through discussion with Dr. Rentschler that at 15 miles an hour, you start to see significant injuries to the human body when it makes contact with a vehicle. And I think one last point is that we needed to pick a speed where, again, this is kind of just us brainstorming, where we would have damage to the taillight, right? It would fracture it, but it wouldn't completely obliterate it. So we knew if we chose a speed, for instance, of 40 miles an hour, we know we're going to completely essentially explode the taillight. But if we do, 1 mile an hour, we may not do anything to it, right? So we kind of had to pick a middle ground to again, cause damage to the taillight.
Makes sense.
Yeah, smart, man.
What
Smart.
was your conclusion with following that testing? What was your conclusion with regard to whether or not it was consistent or inconsistent with the damage to the truck and the taillight was consistent or inconsistent with making contact with John O'Keefe's head at or above 15 miles an hour? So
strictly speaking to a damage perspective, the 15 mile an hour interaction between the hybrid head form and the test tail lamp produced significantly more damage than that of the subject vehicle. So that indicates that, again, the damage
No way.
the subject tail light was less than that of the test tail light.
So if I were to ask you whether or not there would be more or less damage to the taillight if you increase the speed to 24 miles an hour, what is your conclusion?
Well, you're talking about significantly more kinetic energy. So if you just think about it from, again, a kinetic energy standpoint, kinetic energy is equal to 1/2 times the mass and the velocity squared. So if you're squaring that velocity and you're going from 15 up to 24 miles per hour, you're going to get a significant amount of more energy associated with that. Probably, I could pull up my calculator, but you're probably looking at 2.5 more times energy than the 15 mile an hour test.
Which means 2.5 more times the damage to the taillight,
Certainly.
which you did not see in your review of the materials, correct?
Correct.
So what is your opinion or conclusion as to whether or not the damage to the taillight was caused by striking John O'Keefe's head?
From a damage standpoint, it was inconsistent.
Yeah,
I want
boy.
to shift gears back to the injuries that you saw
I was like, can you repeat that again?
to O'Keefe's arm,
Mike.
his right arm.
Yeah.
During the course of your investigation, did you
Oh, but there's more.
photographs and investigate the injuries to his right arm?
Yes, sir.
What's the width of the taillight, specifically from where it meets the lift gate to the left side? I'm sorry,
8 inches, I think?
to the
He said
side of the
6. Didn't he say 6?
6 to 8.
To the right. So, yeah, as I
Wraps,
mentioned earlier, that is about 6.5 inches. Again, it starts to wrap around to the right side. So really, it's even though the taillight continues, it's not projecting out on the back end where it's, again, wrapping around. So in terms of the width that is facing the rear, if you will, it's about 6.5 inches.
And you noted that there was a dent and some paint chips that you identified above the lift gate, correct?
Correct.
How far away from the right side of the vehicle were those scratches and that dent?
Approximately 20 inches.
What was the significance of that distance?
Well, again, to go back to your question about, I think, if somebody was holding a drinking glass, right, and their arm was extended to cause that damage, or if it's theorized that those dents and chips were from that. Again, the thing that sticks out to me is that you have essentially the Lexus taillight.
So ask another question.
What is the,
What's
the significance of
He objected the
whether or not there was a
witness.
between the dent and the tail light? In other words, that 20-inch area. Was it dented? Was it formed in any way?
So in terms of, again, if we're talking about, again, looking at the back of the vehicle and we go to kind of where that right tail lamp just meets the lift gate, as I mentioned, there's another lamp assembly on the lift gate itself. There's also a chrome trim piece above that, and then certainly the body paneling to the liftgate itself. And I think what stood out to me is that between that dent and the fractured taillight, there was no observable damage to that area, which I would have expected had an arm been positioned there.
Can you calculate, or could you calculate, or did you calculate the amount of force that would be required to strike a person just only on the outstretched portion of his arm in order to project him a number of feet, for instance, 30 feet in one direction?
Okay, I just want to make sure I
Objection.
I can't wait to hear this.
He
Oh.
Take a distance out of it. Break it down.
Okay.
I'll ask you the same question, but without the 30 feet.
Get him, Jackson. Get him.
Were you able to calculate, or could you calculate, the force that would be required to strike a person on his outstretched arm hard enough to spin him around and project him a number of feet?
If you're talking about only an interaction between the arm and the back of the vehicle, no, there wouldn't be any projection. Again, if you think about this, the arm weighs about, again, with Mr. O'Keefe would be about 11 pounds. So you still have, another 200 plus pounds being held down by gravity. And force is only acting on the arm. So essentially, the arm would be accelerated, but the whole body, because the center of mass is not being struck, would not be projected.
Yeah, just probably break your arm.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe, well, not even that, because if you
because
hit him
it's
like
flat.
this, it's going this way.
Yeah.
It's going to go this way because you hit him with the back of the hand.
Yeah.
And the rest of the vehicle, with the exception of the taillight, is that consistent or inconsistent with striking an outstretched arm of a human being?
Objection. That son of a bitch. Ooh. I take it back.
They have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
You may.
Dr. Wolfe is
This
hammering
dude
it.
was doing the math in his head while he was talking. He's good.
As to the
Real
amount
good.
of damage that you would expect to see at 15 miles per hour or above on the taillight, if in fact that vehicle were moving in reverse and were to strike something on a human body, for instance, an elbow or an arm.
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Probably not.
That was a long one, yeah.
From your testing, what would you expect to see in terms of the damage to the right rear taillight if in fact that taillight were to make contact with a part of a human body, for instance, an elbow or an arm, at 15 miles an hour or above? What would the level of damage be as compared to the damage that you actually saw?
Well, if we compare it to, again, looking at the drop test that we did with the hybrid head, which weighs about 10 pounds. So again, if we're talking about now a human arm that's comparable in that same weight, we certainly would expect to see a comparable level of force and damage. So as I mentioned, if the arm is outstretched across the right tail lamp and into the liftgate section, I would certainly expect to see deformation to that body paneling, even potentially the tail light on the liftgate itself and that chrome piece as well.
Based on the entirety of your investigation, your entire team's investigation, all the testing that you did, all the biomechanical testing and the engineering and the physics testing that you did, in your expert opinion, was that taillight damaged by striking John O'Keefe on the head?
Objection.
Sustained.
In your opinion,
Whatever.
was the taillight damaged by either striking Mr. O'Keefe on the head or the arm?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach?
Yes.
Is ARCCA known both now?
Oh, that's it?
Oh, wow. Well, that was abrupt. Thanks, producer Steve.
That was the end?
That's the end.
Well, we could wrap it up with the taillight.
Yeah.
So what did we learn from this?
Paul is stupid.
Trooper Paul, not too bright, just saying. And Dr. Wolfe. Damn, he's a smart man.
He locked it down, dude. Listen, if Jackson's he only had to create a little bit of confusion with the jury, right?
Yeah, a little bit of doubt.
Right, a little bit of doubt.
Yeah.
And by Dr. Wolfe's explanation, I mean detailed explanation, and breaking it down to where it's dumbed down to me to where I could understand it.
Yeah.
Boy, I'd be like, yeah, she's innocent.
Yeah.
Right? Just because of what he's saying and how he broke it down. Like, yeah, it's not conclusive. Even by hitting him in the head, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Right? I think what happened is that they got a little verbal argument outside, and I'm not going in, and she accidentally backed into him.
She could have.
And he got pissed and threw the glass, Dr. Wolfe explained, and that was the damage, and he went inside.
Yeah, could be that. Yeah.
Right? Or he might not even made it.
Well, she might have been like, look, I got to go home and take care of your kids or your sister's kids. And you're going to stay here and party, and I'm going to go home. Yeah. It's late. They've already been drinking half the night, right? It's like 3-4 hours. So maybe she was like, I'm done, man. I'm going home. And then, could have backed up and bumped him. He got mad, throw the glass. Yeah. Totally, man. See, a lot of that stuff, America, that's what Trooper Paul, his team should have reconstructed that accident just the way Dr. Wolfe did, right? What they did was not abnormal. That was normal, routine, like reconstruction. This is what we do. It's the same thing we do here in Vegas with CSI. So that's what Trooper Paul should have done. And that's the way Trooper Paul's testimony should have went.
You know what, too, though? I think you can't say anything to help Trooper Paul, but I am. Okay. He was training, right?
Let's hear it. Yeah.
He was training somebody. So he might have been distracted trying to train this person to do things. Honestly,
I'm going to call bullshit.
I'm telling you. I'm saying he still did a shitty job.
Yeah.
But he could have done a little bit less of a shitty job if he wasn't distracted.
Okay, but you're training somebody, right? You're the FTO. You got a dead cop.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You shouldn't have a trainee there.
Who cares about the trainee? You got a dead cop. That's like, you know what? Just watch me stand.
That's what I'm saying.
Follow me and shut up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's what I would do.
He shouldn't have been there.
Especially, you got a new guy and you got a huge scene. No, that's follow me, shut up.
Yep, that's what I'm saying. So
all right. Well, Austin.
Yeah.
We got you.
Yeah.
Even though we're across the country,
we're looking out.
We're looking out for you. So you're not alone, Karen. You're not alone. We got you.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching.
And for those who are still serving, have a safe tour duty, please.
Make a difference in someone's life. Stay classy, Las Vegas.
Always.
Could you hear my stomach growling?
Yeah, I did.
Oh my gosh. I'm so hungry.
1 Sam 5 and 1 Sam 6, copy of 425 call.
Copy. 1 Sam 5 en route.
1 Sam 6, copy, en route.